Welcome back to Welsh Miniature Board Gamer, and today we're going to try and finish off this chapel that we built a couple of weeks ago. So this is the painting tutorial. As you can see, I've put a base onto the building, which is a 5mm MDF. So to give it some texture, we're going to add some filler and water it down and jab it on in order to get some sort of texture. Now we're going to try and keep the wooden parts clear of filler so that it doesn't get too rough and cover over the detail that we want it to keep. But this will give it some texture and make it a bit more interesting than just a plain old flat surface. So you need to get the filler quite wet in order to spread it out. If it's too wet, it won't keep any detail. If it's too thick, it'll just blob on and you'll need to add water in order to get it to move around a bit easier. It purely comes down to practice. Once you've done it a few times, you'll realise the exact consistency that you want to keep your filler at. So next we use this brown colour. Now I've already black bombed it. So now they're going to umber, I think it was. So a dark brown. I'm going to cover all the ground cover. Obviously now, if you wanted to paint yours in a different colour, so you want a different setting, you might want a lighter colour or a dusty colour. But I'm going for this lighter brown, and this is a bit of an optional step because I am going to be flocking it afterwards. So then I got this really dark grey, and with this really dark grey I'm going to be covering over all the black, and as you can see it's got like a bluey sort of slate colour to it. I really like this colour, so that's why I picked it. And I go over all of the outside of the building in it. Don't forget to do the removable tower piece that we had as well. Now it doesn't matter if you go over the wooden trim that we've put on because we haven't painted that yet. So I'm putting it on pretty much neat. I'm not watering my brush down much, just enough to make the paint move around a bit easier. So I try and get inside the window as well, and on the inside of the tower as well, just around the window. So if you do see any white, we want to cover it up so that if you see through. Okay, so we're moving on to the roof, and we're using this. I think it was burnt umber. It was the dark brown again. Oh, sorry, this is raw umber. So we're going to go over the roof, over the shingling. Now, it's not a dry brush, it's an overbrush, so it's like a heavy dry brush. So we're going over everything. We're just trying not to push it under the shingles. Now we'll do the eaves just to get them so they're the same sort of colour. So you go up and down and side to side to hit all the points that are raised, and you'll get a nice thing. Now I know you can't see it very well here, but you will now in a minute. And we're adding a fawn, so this is a very pale colour, so this is a dry brush. So we get most of the paint off our brush, and then we go against the shingles. So it catches the edges, and then on the top of the rim, we're going to bring it back down again, so it catches the light off the top. And we go sideways once we've got most of the paint off by doing against the shingling. So then we'll go sideways to catch the sides of the shingling. Anywhere you're going a bit heavy, just give it a little rub with your fingers, and it's surprising how well you'll blend it in. Now, as with most paints, this will die down as it dries, so it won't be quite so bright. So here I am again, see, just rubbing it to try and blend it in a bit more. And it might look patchy, but it'll look absolutely fine once we've finished. Now I don't paint my scenery or make my scenery to be brilliant. I just make it so it's tabletop and I can just chuck it on and it'd be fine. So now we're going to this burnt umber, which we're going over the ground again, and we're doing a dry brush of this to just pick up the raised detail. Now, this burnt umber is a bit too close to the raw umber for colour. It doesn't really show up a great deal. So again, this is purely optional, but it does add an extra colour. So then we go to this fawn, and this you'll see the dry brush really picks up the texture of the filler. But again, if you're flocking it, you might not want to do this. I do it because if it comes off, I always think, well, at least you're going to see the the brown underneath and not the wood. So now we go to this lighter grey, and we're lightly brushing over the dark grey. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's a dry brush, but it's not a really light dry brush. We want to get 90, no, say, if we're talking percentage, about 70% of coverage with this, or 80% coverage with this. So making sure we get around the window details. And as you can see, it lies on top of the bits that are standing out best, but it covers generally most of the area. Only the deepest recesses will remain unpainted, or painted with the dark colour that we originally started with. And I think it gives a nice impression. Obviously this isn't realistic, because if it was realistic it wouldn't be one big chunk of stone, it would be slabs of stone, so you'd have like brickwork or stonework. But this is a quick and easy way of getting it. No building would be made out of one big chunk of stone like this is giving the impression of. Although you could say that this is some sort of like Wattendaub effect on top. Maybe it's like mud that has been piled on top of the building and then just painted. Maybe that's what it is. But for me, I just want a fantasy style. So we're repeating all those steps that I said previously on this tower piece, and then we're getting that fawn colour again, and we're going to paint all the wooden detail of the trim of the building. So we're just using this straight and painting all the detail. So we're not painting any of the woodwork on the inside of the building or the planking on the roof. All we're doing is the detailing on the outside of the building. This will break up the greys and give us something a bit more interesting to look at, so it's not too monotoned. And I'm using cheap craft paints that you can get from any craft store. And it doesn't matter if it looks perfect as long as it's close enough. Now I'm using some Citadel sepia, Seraphim sepia, just to shade in these trim pieces to give them a look of sort of sandstony, I don't know, sort of colouring. I'm using miniature paint, but you could mix up your own shades. But to be honest, the amount that I'm using, and I got this huge pot of Seraphim sepia that I've decided I'll just use it, the pot, and it'd be like that. So we go around the rest of the building. Now we get the light grey again that we were using earlier, and we paint over the decking. So this is a bit stark at the moment, but again we're going to be weathering it with some shade, so it'll bring the tone down. So here we are again with the sepia wash, and we go over it, and it gives it quite a nice looking weathered wood effect without spending too much time trying to get the colours exact. So we're just going all over it. And this is the way I do the wood on the inside of the chapel too. So now we're on to flocking. So I watered down the glue to maybe 60-40, 60% glue, 40% water, and I spread it out over the pieces which need to be flocked. Now it's a good idea here to raise your to raise your thing that you're working on up off the table, otherwise you're going to end up gluing it to the table. So it gives it a chance for all the pieces to the glue to drip down, and for the flock to slip down. Now I've made a mistake here. I've started flocking right up to the end of where I've glued, and you shouldn't do that. You should leave a little space so that you don't start getting flock in your glue as you're adding the next part. See here, now I stop just before I get to the end of the glue, see, and now I can put the next layer of glue down without actually putting my brush in the flock. So we tap them off and reuse the flock that we've tapped off, raising up the model. So again, we carry on. Now I'm going to leave an area in front of the church leading up to the church, which I am not going to be flock. So actually all those browns and highlighting that we did on the mud will show now, because I'm actually leaving that space as a path leading up to the chapel. So this is just a quick thing of how I painted mine, and in a minute I will do all the rest of it and you'll see what it looks like when it's finished. And here it is. So this is the overall effect that you'll get from the chapel. I know the roof isn't correct. I said that at the time I messed the roof up. But here our party is adventuring towards the chapel, and the size looks about right. There's enough room inside the main chapel building for an adventure, so they're meeting this priest who's there. And there's enough room inside for them to fight on each of the individual floors, which is perfect for me. And of course up on the roof for some ranged attacks, and if they fight their way to the top of an objective. So this is what it looks like, and I think it really works well for what I want from it. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you leave likes and comments, and until next time, goodbye from Welsh Miniature Board Gamer.